I grew up very poor, and that can instill in you this, need to save money and you need to try to make as much as you can and take advantage of any opportunity you possibly can. I really had to work through the mindset of developing an abundance mindset. Like that was a big challenge for me. I had to go from a serious scarcity mindset to trying to develop an abundance mindset.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode 309. Stace, how's it going? What's going on in your world?
Doing great over here. How are you tonight?
Doing pretty good. So I've been doing some research on Tardscar's comment from a few weeks ago, I guess. Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks, about getting more people on that are 50 plus. And I came across this article, super interesting. The title of the article is The Exact Age When You Make Your Best Financial Decisions. There's a magic number for when your expertise and cognitive powers align. That magical age, on average, around 53 and 54. It says, at around that age, people have accumulated knowledge and experience about money, spending, and saving, but haven't begun losing key analytic cognitive skills. Goes on to talk about all sorts of different things. One of the economists in this says, as we get older, we seem to rely more on past experience, rules of thumb, and intuitive knowledge about which products or strategies are better. So maybe Tardscar has a point about getting some people on in their 50s and 60s. Not that I didn't want some of that before, but at any rate, it is kind of interesting to think about that. Based on this research that some of these people have done, and I guess it's the Chromics. Chromic is the one that led the study. By the time you get to the 50, you've probably worked in your working life, a majority of it. And so from a compounded interest standpoint, you don't have as much left. However, we've learned from several people, Warren Buffett, probably the most notable, that from a compounded interest standpoint, his net worth has ballooned since he was 50. One comment this article makes is, one financial mistake 50-year-olds tend to make involves underestimating their life expectancy, which can lead to flawed planning decisions about retirement. A typical 50-year-old expects to live until age 76, when actuarial estimates have that person living another decade to age 86, according to this study, which looked at surveys primarily in Australia. A 2020 study in the United States found that 28% of adults 50 or older underestimated their life expectancy by at least 5 years. So kind of interesting. Stace, I don't know if you felt that there's been an age yet that you've made your best financial decisions, or is those still to come? What do you think?
That's a good question, and something I definitely haven't really considered before. I think that you're always evolving and thinking in some ways, as you are growing your net worth, you're thinking more about how you can invest more, how you can save more. And in some ways you kind of loosen the reins on other things, maybe some convenience things along the way. For instance, I did a grocery pickup order and I needed it at a certain time, and so I paid $5 extra to get it earlier. That was a negative. That was a step back. But doing other things like school supply shopping, I realized, wow, Walmart's way cheaper than Amazon, so I canceled. I took everything off my Amazon cart, put it on Walmart. I don't know. Those are obviously just small things, and I do a lot more of the day-to-day household purchases than I am managing our long-term investments. Obviously, you do a lot more of that than I do. So I think you probably swing the pendulum a lot more than I do. And I think you probably feel like you're always evolving and always learning new things. And, I'm more household budget and trying to stay savvy with that and make sure I'm, not overspending. And we obviously have our budgeting conversations on how things are going throughout the month. So yeah, I think that hopefully you're always picking up little tidbits, putting them in your pocket and using those as you go.
Yeah, I mean, this article is interesting, right? And the fact that, I think there is a lot of wisdom to be learned by people who have more experience. And as always, we would love to get more of those. If you haven't heard your story, haven't heard somebody in your age or whatever. I think we just did an interview this week. We probably won't release for a couple more months, but the gentleman was in his 70s, and it's a phenomenal episode. It is interesting to think about that, by the time you get to, call it early 50s, you've potentially made all the mistakes, you've honed in on your strategy, but you're also staring at retirement in the traditional sense of the word that may only be, a decade away, and you really don't have as much time to add to it. So interesting trend as we start to look at these baby boomers retiring and to see what happens with their portfolios, with their mindset, with working extra jobs, or who knows what, if they did indeed underestimate their life expectancy. And at any rate, we'd love to have more great millionaires on. So if you haven't heard your story, reach out to us, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. Or if you feel like you have heard your story, no biggie. We always love to hear great stories. I wanted to read a couple of reviews. We still got one more week here for enter you into the fact. We've been getting quite a few. This one comes from Freedom 1776. Haven't missed an episode. This is an insightful podcast allowing successful individuals to tell their own unique stories. Although we miss Clark, Jason team have continued on. Stacy adds great energy and perspective in recent episodes. Thank you for this encouraging forum. Appreciate that from Freedom 1776. Also got another great one from Sarah. Love this podcast. Always learn something new. It's a great podcast. Thanks for those. Once again, send us an email with the screenshot of your review, and we'll put you in to enter into the free factor box. Crazy thing to announce this week. Unfortunately, got an email from Stitcher, which we still have more people than I thought actually listening on the Stitcher platform. Stitcher is going to discontinue all their services on August 29th. So this is it. Stitcher's over. They're ending operations on August 29th, 2023. Sad news. So if you're listening to our show on Stitcher, you will no longer be able to. We are working to get that over to Pandora, which is their sister app. And we'll also have a Creator Connect, which is something new. It's part of the Sirius XM network that the podcast will be added to too. But sad news for Stitcher. Hope everything for those listeners on Stitcher can get to a different platform. iTunes is still by far the number one, and then number two now is actually Spotify. So I don't know if you have a Spotify account or not, but hopefully we'll be able to get you access if you were listening on Stitcher previously. So today we've got a great episode with Martin. He's got a net worth just over $1 million. I think the craziest thing about his story is he grew up pretty poor and worked as an engineer, and then built up a real estate portfolio. And now in his mid-30s, he is retired. His wife is still working a traditional job, but he has since retired and kind of started pursuing some entrepreneurial pursuits, as he was able to build up the real estate portfolio large enough to cover what he was making previously as an engineer. So great discussion with him about mindset, changing mindset. He's got about a majority of it in real estate at this point, but we have a discussion with him about winding some of that real estate down and getting into what he calls more of some passive investments. So last week we had Dr. Latifat, and her net worth was just around 2 million. Great episode with her. The reviews coming in are amazing. Without any further delay, let's get into the episode with Martin. Martin, you want to just give us a little about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, sure. I was formerly an engineer, mechanical engineer. Did that for about 10 years. Got very involved in trying to achieve financial independence. Got involved in real estate investing, and used that as my vehicle to achieve financial independence and become a millionaire by the age of 35. So now today, I left my mechanical engineering job in 2022, and now I just work on entrepreneurial stuff as well as other hobbies.
Awesome. Good for you. Before we get into a little bit of the story, though, what is your net worth today?
1.1 million, roughly.
Okay. And what's the breakup of that?
So I have, before the call, I have a little over 600,000 in real estate. We have a solo 401k that has about 156 in it. And then we have a pretty solid chunk of cash that we've built up over the last couple of years just from saving and then also selling a few properties. I believe that's, I'm sorry, I don't know the number off the top of my head.
So you've got 150K in Roth, and then you've got another 150 in the market. Is that correct?
So when I say the market, like I think on my sheet, I said we have a sizable chunk of money that is in SEC funds, I'd call it. Those are like hard money lending funds, stuff like that. And then we have a sizable chunk of cash that we've saved up, kind of doubling back here. But so most of that chunk of cash is now in the hard money lending fund. So
okay. Is that a fund that you source on your own?
No, that is not my fund. That is a friend of mine that runs that fund, and we've known him for a long time. So,
why did you decide to invest into some of these hard money loans?
They're funds. So typically the way that they operate is that, the operator, it's their business to do hard money lending. So they'll perform hard money lending loans for real estate investors. So investor comes to them. They need either a bridge loan or a loan for, 3 to 6 months to do a major rehab project or real estate investment purchase, and during that time frame, they're paying interest to them. The loan is collateralized by the asset, and then so what the hard money lending fund does is they take the money from investors to make those loans. So for me, it's kind of looking at it like, well, that the money's secured in some way, and as a lot of things go with funds like this, it really boils down to the operator and if you trust them and, how long you've known them. And, the people that operate this particular fund that I work with, they've been in business for many years and I've known them for a long time, and they've even kind of been mentors to me to some degree. So, kind of fully trust them with our funds.
And how long have you been invested in those hard money funds?
We started doing that, I'd say about 1.5 years ago. And that's just because I'm slowly kind of transitioning stuff out of real estate. Not that real estate's not a good investment. It's just, some of the headaches that can kind of come with rental real estate, I think over time, and with, owning and managing several properties over the last 5 years, just wanting to get away from some of those headaches and a lot more passive cash flow, even though the returns might not be as great. So,
and do you get paid monthly on that or quarterly, or how does it work usually?
I get paid monthly. You can set it up. This particular fund and the operators are pretty flexible, and they kind of work with their investors individually on whatever you want, but I get paid monthly. So
awesome. So the rest of your net worth's in real estate equity, and you mentioned that you're planning to transition out of owning real estate directly and more into the fund world, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, I know that. So we still have 10 units right now, a mix of different types of properties, but I know that the long-term wealth with real estate is pretty difficult to beat, especially when you factor in, the fact that you've got not just the rental income, but you've got the tax advantages and the appreciation, and you've got somebody else kind of paying your mortgage. It's pretty hard to beat that. So we're gonna hang on to them for at least a while. I'd like to hang on to them for at least 5 years. And I was very active in the management of different pieces of it, and I'm starting to hand a lot of that stuff off now. But yeah, long term, I think we're slowly transitioning our equity to investments that are a lot more passive, that don't require so much work, that kind of mindset. So
do you plan to continue in that same fund, or do you want to diversify across multiple operators, or what's the plan there?
I'm not really sure at this point. I know we've got plans to invest further, but I think, yes, to answer your question, probably diversify some more. What's pretty interesting is like just being, a big networker over the last 5 years, especially in the real estate investing industry. There's no shortage of these types of funds, and there's other funds out there that don't just invest in real estate too. So I particularly like them, and there are better returns than the one we're kind of using right now. So yes, to answer your question, I think we will probably slowly progress more equity over to similar investments.
Quite a bit in cash. Has that been because you've been selling off these properties?
Yes, and we just save a lot. You know, my wife and I live pretty small. I mean, we like to travel, but in general, we just don't spend a lot. A lot of our hobbies don't really add up to a whole lot on a monthly basis. So,
how much do you spend annually usually?
I mean, like non-discretionary, I would say if I look over the last 2 years, it's about $34,000 a year.
Holy cow! So y'all really inexpensive, and I'm assuming low cost of living area.
Yeah, where we live is a very low cost of living area.
In terms of just for our listeners in comparison to throughout the country, I mean, would you put it bottom, one of the cheapest places to live, middle of the road, but low cost of living still?
I would say we're, like 40th percentile nationally. So it's not like we're at the bottom, but we're certainly, not anywhere near the top. So
wow. So the cash and things that you're using to live on now, is that all from income that's kicking off from your rentals?
Yeah, that's correct. My wife still works her job as a psychotherapist, so we have some income from that. But primarily, the breadth of our income comes from the rental properties and the investments.
And we usually ask this at the end, but what has been the range of household income through your working life?
Anywhere from, if I go back over the last 5 years, anywhere from $20,000 a year to over 100.
Wow. Do you have any children?
No children at this point.
Okay, so just the two of y'all. In terms of where you go from here, you mentioned quit your job, you're living off of the real estate income and hobbies. What do you primarily spend your days doing now at this point, especially if you're starting to wind down this real estate portfolio?
I spend my days playing entrepreneur. I have a number of just, projects I'm kind of working on that interest me and are kind of fun. And I guess I can go into detail with those if you'd like. But just pursuing ideas I've had that, so like real estate for me, it kind of got us to where we are ultimately. But I kind of realized after I left my job that the real estate was it just wasn't fulfilling to me. It's certainly a great money maker, and I'm a big advocate for real estate and building wealth that way. But just as far as fulfillment went, it wasn't something I thoroughly enjoyed. So now I kind of focus my time on, what are the things that I just love doing? How can I help other people with them and, potentially turn them into some sort of business, I guess.
Things that you're pursuing.
So I have a community that I've started that's focused on life after achieving financial independence. So, helping people in this space with whatever they might need. It's focused on, especially for entrepreneurs, because if you're like me, like you obviously can't just hit financial independence and then stop doing what you're doing. You got to have something to do. And on top of that, I think there's some pretty interesting things that happen once you kind of hit that point. Some questions that you didn't necessarily consider before. At least for me, there was some questions I didn't necessarily consider before hitting that point, such as, how are you going to spend your time? You got another to, grow your income or keep working and stuff. And I don't know, stuff like that. So
regret as part of that transition, or that you would point out to others that are looking to make the same transition that you have?
Certainly, the question of, I think it should be a really important point to ask yourself, did you enjoy what you were doing that got you to this point? Because really often what I find is that, and not just myself, but also people in the community, is that they get to this point of financial independence, and a lot of them did it through real estate, but there's a lot of different ways to get there. But they get to this point and then they realize, like, well, yeah, like that's great. We got the wealth, but like, now what? What am I going to do now? And I think it's important to ask that question and, focus on something that's going to give you fulfillment.
Steps that you particularly took, maybe, 6 months, a year, 18 months, as you were looking to make that jump and transition?
Yeah, I actually thought that I was going to leave my job and I would start an engineering consulting firm. and because I have a background in mechanical engineering and product development. And I thought that that would be a really great transition, but I pretty quickly realized like it was too much trading time for money. I think there's maybe some ways to develop more leveraged income streams from that, but it was just too much trading time. And I did get a contract to start out with, but yeah, like I said, it was too much trading time. I also back to your other question, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention another project that I'm working on is a book. I'm writing a book and I'm hoping to release that this year. And that book is titled 5 Doors to Freedom. And it's about how to achieve financial independence through a small portfolio of rental properties.
Wow, good for you.
Thank you.
So take us back. When did you buy that first property, and what was that like as you've accumulated, quite a few properties? Are they all single family homes?
A mix of single family homes, duplexes, and a quad. So I actually purchased my first property back in 2016. It's kind of a funny story. I moved back to the area that I live in now, and I rented a duplex from a local landlord. And after I lived there for a little over a month and a half, the landlord approached me and asked me if I wanted to buy the property. And I was like, well, I wasn't really thinking about it at all. I mean, I had the money in the bank, but I was like, it would just kind of blindsided me. And I ran the numbers and I'm like, well, geez, like between the tenant on the other side, like I can basically live in this place for free. Like this is a pretty good deal. And so we talked numbers and negotiated a little bit. And then I bought the property from him. And that was the first one in 2016. And then a couple of years went by. I self-managed that one. I moved out of it and bought a house kind of outside of town, and then rented that side. And then in like 2018, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that was just like the rocket ship for me. That completely just changed my perspective on working and having a W-2 job and being an engineer and stuff. The corporate lifestyle was just never for me. I felt like I was really good as an engineer. Just there were certain things about, working for someone else, and the odds of ever becoming, wealthy were a lot lower and stuff. So I set out on a journey to purchase more real estate, and I got a business partner that was excited about it. And we ended up over the course of about a year, we bought 5 properties in our local area, and we self-managed them, and we didn't know what we were doing. We learned a lot in a short period of time, and we ended up having to do a lot of the work ourselves, maintenance work ourselves. Throughout time, that business partner and I ended up parting ways, and I ended up taking over the business in the rental properties. And then I slowly added 2 more properties. So over the course of about 6 years, we ended up with a total of seven properties for 13 doors, and did a lot of rehabs on them, refinanced them, and then we ended up doing a mix of short-term rentals in a bunch of them, and my wife actually helped me with that. And then that's ultimately what got us to where our ultimate goal was to replace my engineering salary. And so we did that, and that's when I left my job in 2022.
So how long were you working as an engineer before leaving your job?
I worked as an engineer for about 10 years.
Very nice. And then when you and your business partner parted ways, did you end up buying him out, or how did that kind of shake out?
Yes, I did. We had to work through all those terms and come up with a number that we thought was fair. Fortunately, we had been friends before we became business partners, but realized that we weren't a good match as business partners. But we were amicably able to work through that process and come up with terms for me to repay him. I believe the note that we ended up setting up was going to be for 7 years, a 7-year balloon, but with monthly payments and a large price tag. And I was able to, over the course of the next couple of years, through improving properties and refinancing them and a little bit of appreciation, able to pay him out in under 2 years. So
you said some of your properties are long-term rentals and some are short-term rentals?
Yes, that's correct.
And how have you liked that mix? I feel like many people do kind of one or the other. I
love the mix, and I actually put this in my book because I feel like the long-term rentals provide you a pretty nice, solid base to work from. It's a little bit more consistent income. At least where our properties are, they're not necessarily short-term rental markets. So we get a mix of tenants that'll be looking for a place to stay for a few months, or tenants that want something short. But the income is a little bit more cyclical. You don't know necessarily when you're going to have a vacancy. It's kind of hard to predict. But the long-term rentals do provide, I feel like, a pretty nice base. So that it's always fluctuating, but the long-term rental is a little bit more predictable. But I would say the short-term rentals are a lot more work. And unfortunately, people don't always take good care of the property. And, it seems like there's just a lot more stuff that we have to deal with the short-term rentals.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We actually used to have an Airbnb and we got stuff stolen from it or broken just constantly. Wife is involved in managing your short-term rentals, is that right?
She helped me. She was the interior designer. So when it came to us furnishing the properties and setting them all up, she was the interior designer and helped pick out all the artwork and the furniture and all that stuff. Couldn't have done it without her. I don't have an eye for that type of thing. And then on top of that, she helped with, we saved quite a bit because we, with a lot of our decorations and decor and stuff like that, we would go to secondhand stores and stuff like that to find stuff, and she just had a knack for it. She's really good at it. So altogether, we furnished 5 properties, but today I manage those.
Where does this journey take you? Do you look at a target net worth? Do you feel like you've already made it and now it's just a matter of kind of life optimization? Or how do you think about that at this point?
It's a super interesting question. And I think for me, because our real estate journey, it was kind of painful. I did a lot of the work on the rehabs that we had to get done. And that was just due to, failed contractors that did not come through and a lot of miscellaneous other things. But, that pain really makes you stop and question, like, okay, this got me here and we're financially independent, but, what's next? And I think, I have financial goals like a lot of people, but now it's a lot more about life optimization. I think that's a definitely accurate statement. Like I said, I still have, further net worth goals and cash flow goals and stuff, but it's no longer necessarily about the money. A lot of my just curiosity now is, or even over the last year, has been around, well, how much money does it take, and what's it take to be happy? Well, there's so much more that goes into that than money. And I think one of my biggest realizations was this kind of fallacy that we chase money, and it's not necessarily the thing that's going to make us happier. So
more happier now than you were, say, 5 years ago when you were working in your job trying to build up the real estate portfolio?
Yeah, I think I think it has a lot to do with Maslow's hierarchy. So you kind of meet that financial need, and then you start focusing on other things like fulfillment and things like that. But yeah, overall, with where we're at, our biggest dream was to be able to travel, and we already have a few trips planned for the year, and I'm super excited about them. My wife's super excited about them, and yeah, life is great.
And where are you going to go?
Our first trip is we're doing a 3-week trip in Eastern Europe, and then we have a second tentative trip for Spain and Portugal.
Hey, Eastern Europe, what's the draw to go to Eastern Europe?
We just love Europe. We haven't been to that area yet, and there's a ton of just great history to see there. And honestly, what it came down to was we have a list of places we want to go, and then we're subscribed to a few things that point out good flight deals to us. And the deal came up to go to Prague, so we booked it.
Nice. Are you staying the whole time in the Czech Republic?
No, we are planning to go to do a big circle. So we're, go to Southeast, Eastern Germany, Poland, kind of doing a big loop.
Awesome. Big bucket list trip?
Yeah. My wife and I, for the longest time, wanted to, go backpack Europe. And actually, after I left my job last year, we went to Croatia for almost 3 weeks. And that was just so much fun. So we really enjoy that. And I would say we're even now focusing more on potentially doing or trying to slow travel. So trying to set stuff up so that we can do more of that.
Let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive pair of pants that you've purchased?
Fire hose pants for like $60 once they first came out.
Expensive pair of shoes?
Probably a pair of work boots. I bought a pair of Carolinas that were like $200.
What about the most expensive car?
CRV, which we bought 6 years ago for about $13,000.
What's been the most expensive trip or experience that you've paid for?
We went to Italy when we got married, and that trip was around 7,000.
What is the lesson you learned from childhood?
It's a double-edged sword, but saving money and being frugal. And if something go too far that way, it can kind of be a scarcity mindset. And that'd be my answer.
Okay, will you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that, I grew up very poor, and that can instill in you this, need to save money, and you need to try to make as much as you can and take advantage of any opportunity you possibly can. And I didn't grow up in a household of entrepreneurs. I grew up in a household where, we went to work and, blue collar. That can go too far one way, to where when it became apparent to me that being an entrepreneur might be a good fit for me, I really had to work through the mindset of developing an abundance mindset. Like that was a big challenge for me. I had to go from a serious scarcity mindset to trying to develop an abundance mindset.
And how did you make that transition?
It wasn't easy. I think reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts, surrounding myself with people I wanted to be like, finding mentors.
Thing you've ever done to earn money?
Ever done to earn money? You'll probably be pretty surprised to hear about it, but it's small. It's basically hard money loans to friends. So real estate investing friends need a loan. You tell them, you set a price and how many points for the loan, and I think a lot of people would consider that high risk, but to me, the risk is mitigated in a lot of different ways. So yeah, to answer your question, I'd say hard money loans.
Okay. How does one get ahead in life?
Educate yourself, establish good habits, surround yourself by the people you want to be like, and work hard and set goals.
Okay. Where did your interest come from in personal finance?
I think there was always an interest there. It just really blossomed, I think, when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The fact that you don't necessarily have to trade your time for money, that just opened the door to so many different things. So I don't know that there was necessarily a point or something in my life that really made me interested in personal finance, but I would say that was a big turning point with my attitude towards it. I was always frugal. I was always, ambitious at work and trying to achieve promotions and increase my salary and stuff. But I would say after reading that book was a huge, huge changing moment for me. So,
okay. What's a closely held belief that you've recently changed your mind on?
Financial independence gave me the excuse to do what I really wanted, which was be an entrepreneur. Just gave me the sense of security to be able to go do it.
Sense of security.
Well, we have a certain net worth and a certain amount of cash flow, and to some degree, I know financially we're going to be perfectly okay. It's like that need is completely met, so it gives me complete freedom to go work on entrepreneurial things or things that I'm passionate about. But I didn't necessarily have to, establish that to go work on those things to begin with.
Last pieces of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey.
Education and, consuming as much education as you possibly can. Strongly recommend, setting goals for yourself and surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are trying to achieve the same thing.
Number of doors in mind that you want to grow your real estate portfolio to?
I actually really don't want to grow the portfolio anymore. I'm good with what we've got. We may, since we're talking about relocating, I'd contemplate adding one more property to the portfolio in wherever we move to.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more about this book that you're writing as well.
Yeah, sure. It's entitled 5 Doors to Freedom. It's about our journey, and it's more specifically about how to achieve financial independence through a small portfolio of rental properties and why you should.
Do you feel like there's any risk involved with having a smaller portfolio versus a larger one?
So the way that I look at risk is there certainly is, but how I've kind of gone about it is a direct application of my engineering background. And that's really looking through all the risks associated with it and then asking, how can I mitigate that risk? And so there's a lot of specific things that I've done to mitigate issues that could arise because we have a small portfolio. And that's allowed me, it's been operating at the same, we haven't changed anything in the portfolio in over a year. And we've been cash flowing really good. And if I look through that exercise, there's probably 6 or 8 different things that could possibly go wrong. But we've done things to mitigate them if they ever happen. So for example, we always keep a 6-month emergency fund. And all of our loans on all of our properties are fixed rate, or if they are variable, we've already calculated what the worst possible scenario could be. And I know that we'd be fine if it ever came to that. And that would have to be a pretty bad scenario, because most of them can only even move 1% a year. So
like everyone will be learning a lot from your book. I'm excited to see it when it comes out.
oh, thank you so much.
Awesome. That's Martin with a net worth of just over $1 million. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.